In this installment, or combined installment of Sabbath Thoughts and Reflections, and It's Not As You Perceive, we will reflect upon the keeping of the day of Firstfruits, and we answer a Sabbath keeping question from one dear listener. Shalom and welcome. Shalom, fellow saints, and welcome to this combined installment of Sabbath Thoughts and Reflections, and It's Not As You Perceive. I'm Rod Thomas, and today, once again, we are blessed to have with us my lovely wife, my life partner in ministry, and it's Hillary. And say hello, Hillary.
Hello, saints. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, and if you happen to be listening to this episode on the Sabbath, indeed it's a Shabbat Shalom. If it's outside of the Sabbath, we bid you Shavua Tov. And any other time that you're listening, the material that we are putting out today is evergreen, and it is applicable to any time of the week. And we encourage you to take advantage of Hillary's content generally on It's Not As You Perceive, www.itsnotasYouperceive.com, and of course from me, Rod, at the MessianicTorahObserver.org. So we're looking at today, as we're posting this installment, we're looking at having really just wrapping up the Passover unleavened bread season. And it was, for me, it was a great time of reflection. It was a great time of, I've heard the term used, meaningful. It was meaningful for me, and I'm really interested in hearing what Hillary's reflections of her Passover unleavened bread week were like. But for me, it was a meaningful time because I got to this year reflect upon the one or two areas of my life that I know I needed improvement on. And these weren't really horrendously grand areas that I needed improvement on, but they were areas that I know throughout last year and even going into this year I needed to improve on. And these were the things that I studied in the scriptures on, I talked to Hillary about, I prayed about them and meditated on them, and I'm looking for the Holy Spirit to do a great work in making those corrections in my life as I seek to try to conform to the image of our Master Yeshua. So it was a wonderful, wonderful week we had a wonderful time for Passover, and we had a great week of consuming unleavened bread for this being the seventh day. So I'm curious as to what your thoughts were for your Passover and unleavened bread.
This Passover and unleavened bread, I think meaningful is an apt word, but revelation is also a good word for me. Each year we try to do the best we can with the learning that we have, with the understandings that we have. And we find that Father is constantly teaching us, opening our eyes, opening our ears, and showing us, areas of our life that we didn't pay attention to before. And one of the things about me is integrity is important. And when I listen to other ministers, teachers talk and teach and say stuff, I just shake my head, or it just rubs me wrong. But then this season, this feast, as I reflected on it, and I was in the tub, I was soaking, and I was talking to Father, and he just made it clear to me. He says, "Don't worry about those things." Each person is on his own journey, and I already knew that. So it was easy for him to get through to me, to reveal to me how I should feel about things, how I should handle things, and how I should look at other people putting out information that they made up or that they tweaked. And it's not sound in the word. Those are the things that Father really revealed to me over this season, saying they're worshiping him and he will honor the things that are truth. The things that people say that are not truth, he doesn't honor that, but he honors the truth in whatever we do. And he's looking for truth in many different places. So if he can do it, I can do it too. Because I am not God, so I shouldn't be so hard. And so I lighten up. Yeah, it was something for me to lighten up. Don't be so, what is that word I'm looking for? Don't be so strict. So that was what happened with me this time. And I think it's going to make life much easier for me now, because I will be able to smile a lot more when I hear things that are not Bible based or that are, twisted, and just let people go ahead and teach whatever they teach and don't worry about it. That's between them and Father, which, I already knew that, but inside of me, it's like, how many people are going to listen to that and follow that? How many people are going to hear that and believe that? That's not in the Bible. And, those are just some of my issues, but Father knows how to work through that. I mean, Yeshua is our teacher and our master. That's his job, not mine.
Well, isn't that in great part what the whole Feast of Unleavened Bread is about? The period of time that the Holy Spirit works in us to purge out, to leach out, to draw out those rough areas in our life that are impeding us from fulfilling our fullest potential in Messiah.
That's true. I mean, we get so keyed up in areas where we should not be keyed up. And he cannot pull out of us the things that he has placed in us, the things that we should do, if we have created a block. So the potential that he has put in us needs to come out, and he can only do it if we focus on the things we are supposed to focus on and not focus on what other people are doing.
Well, and I think that brings up a very, very poignant point, that it just further, what you and I experienced this week further solidifies the importance of keeping these appointed times. They're important not from a cognitive standpoint, because a lot of people are becoming aware of the Hebraic roots, the Hebraic heritage. There's a whole lot of little pop culture phrases being thrown out there about Hebrew roots nowadays. And it just, for me, solidifies how important it is for us at the beginning of every calendar year to set these days aside. For those of us who work, we need to really start to think about making those times our vacation times, using the vacation that we have, vacation hours we have. If we're retired or not, planning ahead for those times so that we can shut down and really focus on the things that Father wants to reveal. Father didn't just put these feast days, these celebrations, these festivals into play for the purpose of just doing it. Father has a reason for every single thing. In our last episode that you and I did, and I believe for Sabbath Thoughts and Reflections, it was episode 110, and for It's Not As You Perceive, it was 90. You and I talked about observing and guarding and keeping the new year, and how important it was that we really set aside not just time, but set aside within ourselves and within our psyche, within our everyday life, the time and the focus, so that Father can speak to us. Father set these days aside so that he can talk to us and reveal these things to us. And that's the brilliant thing about these feasts. It's not just that they have prophetic shadow picture meaning, but it really, really, really is a time that Father can meet with us and work with us and work on us and help fix us. It's a process that's ongoing 365 days a year, but it's even more intense, or it should be more intense, on those very unique and special Moedim, those set-apart days.
That is true. And when we see ourselves as the bride of Messiah, we are not just thinking about the contract. We're thinking about the relationship, right? And so we do have a marriage covenant, but we must walk it out through building our relationship. We can't build relationship if we don't spend time together.
That's true.
It's a long distance relationship, and some long distance relationships work, but there are lots of holes in them, lots of weaknesses in them. So it's important that when Father puts these, since Father has made a calendar, it's like having a date with your husband. When he sets up goes through the process of setting up the dates, and we have these dates when we're going to be coming together, we're going to be meeting, we look forward to it. So we put ourselves into it, and we think about, what do we offer to the relationship? Not just what we get out of it, not just the benefits to us, but how do we contribute to the relationship? And that is what Father wants us to do. That's why he has put this potential in us, so that he can develop it for us to contribute to the relationship. But if we're absent, or if we're distracted, or if we're doing other things, or we miss the date, then we miss the opportunity. And that's how we need to look at this. This is our time to build intimacy with him.
That is a very, very good, apt analogy to use as a date. And I've often used that analogy in some of my installments. And you have used this analogy over and over again. And it is such an apt analogy that we really need to really take these feasts serious. And it's not about a mechanical keeping. It's not about a cognitive understanding. Oh, well, yeah, today is Passover. Oh, yeah, this week is unleavened bread. Okay, I guess I'll go and buy a case of matzah and eat one square a day, and I'll fulfill my thing. And then you're looking at the calendar every day and saying, how much more time how many more days do I have to keep eating this, because I'm longing for that fluffy, luscious bread, that that leavened bread that all of us prefer over the matzah. But if you really put yourself, if you invest yourself in it, and you're willing to die to self, and you turn everything over to Father, it's a joy. I can honestly say that I did not have an inclination this week for anything leavened.
No.
I was just so consumed, and you and I would often sit down throughout times of the day and just have our wafers of matzah, and we didn't think anything about it, but it was an opportunity to talk about the goodness of Yehovah. It was an opportunity to reflect upon the meaning of the feast. like you mentioned, we listened to a number of teachings this week. I think we subscribed to like 3 conferences online. So those were great opportunities to kind of bring in and break up the week with some really good teachings. I mean, not all of them were spot on, but some of them were. And so we had a great time together and a great time with Jehovah. So it is our hope and trust and prayer that, your families, your fellowships, and you had a wonderful and blessed Passover and unleavened bread. And in this installment, we're looking at 2 areas that we want to really drill home on. And one is a little known taught about feast day called Firstfruits. And the other topic that we're going to be looking at is an issue that was born out of a question that a dear listener of this ministry had brought up about the Sabbath. And I think and a lot of times I usually answer the person directly, or Hillary will answer directly the person, but this one I felt is so pertinent to many of us in this walk, in this faith, that I thought it would be very, very good, instrumental, excellent material to discuss here in this forum. But before we move into these 2 topic areas, a little bit of housekeeping. Today is, as we are recording and posting and publishing this episode or installment, we are at the 21st day of the first month of Aviv, according to the observational calendar. And if you're using the Jewish calculated calendar, we're at the 23rd day of Nisan. Now, if you're new to this faith community, we ask you to reach out to us if you have any questions, or if you just need guidance or somebody to communicate with about the things of this faith. We invite you to communicate with us by the various means that we have incorporated on both websites. It's Not As You Perceive and the Messianic Torah Observer. We have an email address of perceptionwp@gmail.com. Again, that's perceptionwp@gmail.com. You can use the SpeakPipe feature that hovers off to the right-hand side or portion of both websites. You simply go over with your little mouse cursor and you can click on that little iconish kind of thing over to the right that says SpeakPipe. You can't miss it. And there are little prompts that will help you. As long as you have a microphone for your computer, then you can easily use it. It's a great feature, and we get email prompts that you left a message, and we get to listen to it, and I think it even leaves a transcript of your call. So we get that, or you can use the comment boxes that precede each posting on either site. So we invite you to go ahead and do that. We do have a Google number of 919-374-8215. Again, that's 919-374-8215. If you want to reach out to us, whether you're new to Hebrew Roots or whether you have a question about anything, you've been in the faith for a long time and you have a question about this content or anything having to do with our faith, we invite you to reach out and touch us, so to speak. So you can follow us on social media. On both sites, we have what I call a little icon corral over to the top right portion on both websites that feature all of the social media platforms that we subscribe to. And you can go ahead and click on those and follow us. You can subscribe to our podcast, and all subscribing does is that it will automatically download our podcast installments onto your smart devices automatically as we produce and publish each one. And lastly, if you are so led by the Spirit, we invite you to commission this ministry. This is not a This is not asking for money. It's not begging for money, but we've had listeners and readers of this program, and readers and listeners of our ministry who are led by the Spirit to support, to give of their increase, of their offerings, their free will offerings, and even portions of their tithe to support this ministry. And we are happy to accommodate that if you're led. So we invite you to use the donate buttons that populate the right-hand column toward the bottom of both websites. And that's where you can make your donation. So we're happy that you are here with us today. We're hoping, praying, and trusting that this installment finds you, your families, and fellowships well and blessed. So what do you say that we go ahead and begin the two topic areas in this installment? The first topic that we'll hit today is on the day of Firstfruits. And we're not going to delve super deep into the day of Firstfruits, but I think it was important for us to discuss because we spend so much time talking about Passover, the month of the Aviv, unleavened bread, but how many of us ever hear good substantive teachings on the day of Firstfruits? And it's interesting from my perspective, and Hillary can give her perspective, but from my perspective, when I first came into this Hebrew roots walk, over a dozen years now for me, I never heard anything about the day of Firstfruits until probably halfway through my walk, about 6 years into it. And upon hearing about it, it opened up an entire new area of the feast that I had not even been privy to prior before. And I've been blessed ever since. This little one-day feast that's sandwiched within the Passover week has tremendous and powerful prophetic and spiritual meaning. Now, you will hear the day of Firstfruits also described or called out as Yom HaBikurim. Yom, of course, is Hebrew for day. The Bikurim, Firstfruits, day of the Firstfruits. So that is what you will often hear mentioned whenever you hear somebody talk about the day of Firstfruits. And it is slated for the first day of the week in this calendar year on 4/8 of 18, which, as we're recording and publishing this episode, would be today. And if you're using the Jewish calendar, calculated calendar, it actually occurred way back on 4/1 of 18 on the calendar, and it was noted as Pesach 2 and the first day of the Omer. Now, we're going to get into this. There's a tie-in with the Omer and what has been popularly referred to as the counting of the Omer. It's the day that we begin to count the Omer leading up to Shavuot, but don't want to kind of give all of that away just yet. But it is certainly one of the key event feast days of the entire 7-day mandated Feast of Jehovah. It's not a holy day. It's not one of the high holy days, but it is a feast day none the same. And it can be found, the actual parameters, the actual regulations, the actual practice of it was established and can be found in Leviticus chapter 23, verses 10 through 14. And Hillary's going to do a little bit of a discussion right at this point to kind of give us an overview of the Day of Firstfruits, as well as brief us or to teach us what the prophetic and spiritual applications are.
Wow, this is good. Thank you, Rod. Leviticus 23, 10 to 14. And this is the instruction. When you enter the land I am going to give you and you reap its harvest, bring to the priest a sheaf which is a single bundle of the first grain you harvest. He is to wave the sheaf before Jehovah, so it will be accepted on your behalf. The priest is to wave it on the day after the Sabbath. On the day you wave the sheaf, you must sacrifice a burnt offering unto Jehovah, a lamb that is a year old without defect, together with its grain offering of 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil, an offering made to Jehovah by fire, a pleasing aroma, and its drink offering of 1/4 of a hin, which is 6 liters of wine. And you must not eat any bread or any new grain until the very day you bring this offering to your God. This is to be a lasting ordinance for the generations to come wherever you live. So now we have the instructions. And Firstfruits, the day of Firstfruits, is also the day of the wave sheaf offering. There was a time when my brother and my sister used to talk about the wave sheaf offering. And okay, so this is the day of the wave sheaf offering. This is the day of Firstfruits. But I never received a teaching on it. But one thing I knew was that I needed to figure out which day was a wave sheaf offering, because that day starts the 50-day count to Pentecost. And that was, for the longest time, my focus on the day of Firstfruits. But then, as I continued to study the gospel of the kingdom of God, I found that there was more to the day of Firstfruits than just marking a spot on the calendar.
Okay, before you go any further, you mentioned two things. You mentioned Firstfruits and you mentioned wave sheaf offering. Are they synonymous? Are they the same thing? Or are they two different things? You may be covering that later on, but I'm just curious because I think it's important for us to flesh this out very early because that's another thing that I failed to mention when I was talking about how you will hear this day described. You'll hear Firstfruits, you'll hear Yom HaBikurim, and now you brought up one I completely forgot, which is wave sheaf offering. So are they the same or are they different?
The day is the day of Firstfruits. The wave sheaf offering is the Firstfruits.
Okay.
So you cut your Firstfruits, and it is actually the sheaf of barley, 1 omer of it, and an omer is a handful, like a fistful. That's a measurement. That's about how much it is. It's not a basketful. It's not, your harvest. It's just a fistful of it that is the best of the harvest. And that's all you're bringing in to the priest. And every person must bring this from their field to show the priest so that he can be waved before Jehovah. And that's why it becomes the wave sheaf offering, okay. Because they're waving it. Okay, so they're waving the sheaf.
I figured you're probably going to cover that also later on, but I just wanted to kind of clear that up very early. But please go on.
Yeah, so this is the first grain, and this is the barley harvest. This is the first grain harvest. And so once the priests wave it before Jehovah, why is he doing that? He is doing it for Jehovah's acceptance. The instructions say, do not eat anything from your harvest until this is offered. This wave sheaf is offered. So because it is offered, it is an offering. So we're waving the sheaf as an offering to Jehovah, hoping for his acceptance of it. Once he accepts it, then they can go ahead on that very day and start reaping the harvest. But they're not allowed to reap the harvest or to eat anything from it until they have the clear that Jehovah has accepted their wave sheaf offering.
Now, backing up just a little bit, and I know that 2 episodes ago for me, and the last episode that you were with me, we talked about guarding the month of the Aviv. And we made a lot to do about the barley harvest being in a maturation state of Aviv. Is this not the reason why it was important that we recognize the barley being in an Aviv state for this very purpose, this very day, this very wave sheaf offering?
Yes, because this is the barley that became Aviv, that started the month, that started the year. And in the Aviv state, it is not ready to be plucked or to be harvested. It is in the state where just before it ripens, and because once it is ripened, then you brush against it and the seeds fall out.
And it's ready to be implanted again to start next season.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly. So now they are harvesting it. Now it is at the place for them to harvest it, at the state for them to harvest it. It's not going to fall out and reseed the ground.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So when they cut it now and they bring it and it is offered to Jehovah, he determines acceptable or not acceptable. The significance of this wave sheaf offering. Like I said, I used it as a marker on the calendar. Other people use it for different things. But what did Father intend for it to be? And that is what I want to focus on today. When we look at the feasts of Jehovah, this one falls in the week of unleavened bread. And the unleavened bread is all about Yeshua. It starts with the Passover where he's crucified, and it goes through to the 3 days and 3 nights when he is in the grave. When Yeshua resurrected, it was the Sabbath evening leading up to the first day. So it was leading up to the first day. So in Matthew 28 and verse 1, it says, "In the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn towards the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre." In verse 2 it says, "And behold, there was a great earthquake, for the angel of Jehovah descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat upon it. His countenance was like lightning, and his raiment white as snow. And for fear of him, the keepers did shake and became as dead men." This is verse 4. So here, when the angel appeared, the guards who were making sure that the disciples didn't come and steal the body, they were standing there. And when they saw the angel, they were like frozen. But at the same time, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came during the same period of time. So at this time, the angel answered unto Mary and Mary Magdalene and Mary. And the angel answered and said unto the women, "Fear not, for I know that you seek Yeshua, which was crucified." Now, notice the time of day here. It is at the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn towards the first day. Okay, so it was just before the first day that Yeshua had already risen, the end of the Sabbath, just before. So now, this is all about Yeshua. The Passover was about him. The 3 days and 3 nights was about him during this period. And now this day, he is resurrected. And when the angels came down, he says, behold, there was a great earthquake. Now, when we look in other scriptures that are parallel to this, we see that the earthquake caused the graves to open. The earthquake after Yeshua was resurrected. And then the people saw the saints of old resurrected from the grave. And they were walking towards the holy city. So what is the connection to Yeshua here? As the high priest, because we know he was inaugurated at the Mount of Transfiguration, where the disciples, the 3 disciples who were with him, they saw Moses and Elijah. And all 3 of them saw the same thing, and they were all talking about it when the transfiguration session was done, and they were coming down. And Yeshua said to them, don't say anything of this to anybody. Okay? So this is not a figment of their imagination. This is not a dream. This is not hallucination. This is something that all 3 of them saw. They all witnessed it, and they were talking about it. This inaugurated high priest of Jehovah is in place for this day. On this day, the high priest is supposed to present the first fruits to Jehovah. When he does, there is another offering that he's supposed to present. That is the heave offering. First, to begin with, we're talking about the resurrection. He had to be resurrected before he could fulfill this mission. He became high priest before his crucifixion, and at his resurrection, he is now ready to carry out his high priestly duties. One of the things that Jehovah has commanded is that when the men come up to the pilgrimage feasts, which are 3 of them, unleavened bread, Shavuot, and tabernacles, when they come up, they must not come up empty-handed. And all of them are supposed to come up. As the Messiah, as the Word becoming flesh, Yeshua said, you search the scriptures. It is all written about me. Torah is a representation of what Yeshua does in our redemption. That's what all these laws are about. Actually, when he comes in and he clarifies something on the law, we have to understand he came to fulfill it. So he's clarifying it. He's making it plain. He's making it clear. He is walking it out. He is being the example. He is answering unanswered questions. So now he is about to do his high priestly duties. And he being the first sheaf, because the day of first fruits, temple services was all about, was the shadow. It was about the fields, the fruits. Father used everything as a parable. Okay, Yeshua taught it was all a parable. So this sheaf of barley represents something in the spirit. It's not about the barley. It's about what it represents. The lamb that they were crucifying is not about the animal. It's about what the animal represents. Mm-hmm. The blood of the animal is not about the animal. The burnt offering is not about the lamb. It's about what it represents. So same here on the day of first fruits, the sheaf of barley, it's not about the barley. It's about what it represents.
See, now you're starting, and I love this. Now you're starting to, you're stepping on some toes, because I know that we tend to want to, when we began this walk in Hebrew roots, we wanted to do it right. And so we began to focus on what was it that we needed to do, A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, to make the Sabbath holy, to keep the feast days, to honor the individual laws and instructions that Father gave us in Torah. So the next thing you know, over time, we're focused solely upon the rote mechanical application of these feasts, like you just said, on the lamb. So now we've got folks in Hebrew roots that are sacrificing lambs and applying blood to their doors. We have people who focus only on these things. Now you got people who will actually bundle up omers of barley in the count up to Shavuot. And so is there really ultra anything wrong with it? I don't know. Probably not. But I think what you said is so poignant. The focus cannot be on these mechanical things, because to be honest, we don't have a temple anymore. So we can't really keep these feasts in the mechanical, or the, how should I say it to be a little more, less harsh. We can't keep it in the exact sense that Torah spells out. And that is the providence and the wherewithal and the wisdom of Father. Father knew this was all going to pass away. The whole temple rite ceremonies and things of that nature, as beautiful and as wonderful as they are, the priesthood has changed. The exercises that we did have now been changed. And you bring up an amazing point that I have always been trying to talk about. We focus so much on the mechanical roteness of Torah.
Right. And that's what the Pharisees were focusing on, the mechanical roteness of it. When they come to the feast, they're saying, we are looking forward to a bountiful harvest of more barley.
Right.
That's what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. Right? Father is saying, yeah, you are working with barley, but barley represents something else. And as far as they were concerned, the significance of this feast is the beginning of the harvest. Mm-hmm. It's all about their food harvest. But when we think about Yeshua and that all the whole temple furnishings, the feasts, everything represented him, back then they didn't get it. But today we get it because Yeshua has come. Yeshua is resurrected. We have received the Holy Spirit. Now our eyes are opened. Granted, Father has closed their eyes and kept it blind for a while so the Gentiles can come in. But now that the Gentiles are here and they understand, they have taken it a little bit too far where they said, oh, the law doesn't matter anymore. It's just the faith that matters.
Right, right.
And so the grace tells us we don't have to obey the law anymore. But Father said, you still must come because it's a perpetual feast. It doesn't stop. You still come, though there is no temple to come to. You, where he has now placed his name, no longer on a building made with hands, but on your person.
Amen.
This is where he has placed his name now. We are his temples. Mm-hmm. So we, his temple, is where he shows up for the feast. And we must be present when he shows up.
We have to do these feasts every year because, one, we're human and we forget. And that's why it becomes indelible. It becomes imprinted on us when we come up every year and we do these feasts. It's imprinted within us, the meaning, the rich meaning and the spiritual applications. And we also get to go back and revisit what happened to our forefathers so that we can learn from their mistakes and learn how to do it right and learn that we are prone to messing up. So we need to learn from their mistakes. And the other thing that I wanted to comment before you continue is that it all is about Yeshua. The end of the law is Yeshua. Not saying like the traditional Christians say that the law has been done away at the end of the law. No, we're saying everything begins and ends with Yeshua involving Torah.
Yes. And he said he did not come to do away with the law, but to fulfill. And there are portions of the law that he's still yet to be fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, he has fulfilled the part where we no longer have to do the sacrifices of animals anymore. We no longer slaughter a sheep and offer it on an altar for a sin offering. It's not required anymore because he died once and for all. Save the sheep.
Save the sheep. Okay.
Okay? So now the sheep is our dinner for Passover.
Amen.
That's what the lamb is for the dinner. It's a representation. We no longer go through that anymore. When Yeshua resurrected, he resurrected with an agenda. He had something to do. He has duties to carry out. And first to begin with was himself. He was supposed to be offered as an offering, as a wave sheaf offering in the temple that is in heaven, Amen. Not on earth, because on earth that temple was already defiled and corrupt. Mm-hmm. That's the reason why Father didn't even have his Ark of the Covenant there.
Yeah, had disappeared centuries before.
Right. Because their mind was corrupt. Their practices were corrupt. Everything that they did was corrupt. And Father was continuing with allowing them to continue with their rote, superficial, physical activities because there was a day coming when the true lamb, the lamb that he said he would provide, when he spoke to Abraham on Mount Moriah, when Abraham was about to offer his son Isaac.
A shadow picture.
Yes, it was a shadow picture. He said he would provide the lamb. Don't worry about it. Don't. I was just testing to see how devoted you were to me, what your faith was going to be when I tell you to give up your son. And he said, now I know. Now I know your heart. I will provide the lamb. And this lamb is Yeshua. So he had everything fulfilled in Yeshua and things not yet fulfilled in the present time frame here on earth. Father has already seen it. Time is not a barrier for him. He can see the past, the present, and the future all at once. So that has already been accomplished. That's why Peter said, you were healed. And by his stripes, you were healed. Okay? So let's get back, though, to the point. The point is Yeshua got up out of the grave with a mission, with an assignment. And that was to do the wave sheaf offering, to do the wave offering, because it was not only a sheaf that was going to be waved, and that sheaf was who? Yeshua. Mm-hmm. He didn't go into somebody's field and cut their barley and go wave it, because it's not his field. You can't go into somebody's field and cut their stuff and offer it. That's thievery. Okay? So Yeshua, being sinless, he is going to keep the law correctly. And he who knows that it's all talking about him, he knew he was the lamb. He knew he was the sheaf. And he knew he had to go and present himself as the wave sheaf offering in heaven before the Father. And that's what he did when he woke up from the grave. But he quickly returned, because remember he said to Mary, don't touch me. I have not yet ascended to my Father who is in heaven, because he needed to go present himself before he could be touched, because he needed to be undefiled.
And the parallel here on earth at the temple in Jerusalem was the high priest could not be touched
exactly
during this period until the wave sheaf offering
exactly.
was complete.
So now Yeshua has gone up. He has presented himself as the wave sheaf offering, and now he's back. Well, there's another offering that he needs to present, and that is the heave offering. And the heave offering is an offering that Father has commanded all the Israelites that they must bring this gift to the priest. This is a gift to the priesthood. Okay. And so when the priests receive it, they're supposed to present it to Jehovah. And then Jehovah says, okay, now, Aaron, you and your sons and your household can eat this, or those who are worthy to eat it. And this is the heave offering. Now, the heave offering was a leg of the animal and a shoulder. So what is Yeshua going to do when he brings this? What is he doing rather when he brings this heave offering? The heave offering is a free will gift. It's a peace offering or a free will gift offering. He takes these people who were resurrected up. Remember, they came and the people saw them walking to the holy city. They recognized them. They were recognized as the saints of old who got up out of the grave, and they were walking. Now, how do we have 24 elders in heaven sitting around the throne? These are the 24 elders because he took them up after his resurrection. He was the first resurrection, and then they were resurrected at the earthquake, and he took them up with him. This is what we're talking about. So Yeshua had to do the wave sheaf offering, which is waved from side to side in a horizontal manner. And then he had to offer the heave offering, which is waved up and down. Now, when you look up the word heave, it is a load. It is carrying a load. And so it is up and down waving. In Exodus 29 and verse 7, it says, "And you shall sanctify the breast of the wave offering, which is waved, and the shoulder of the raised offering, which is raised up, of the ram of the consecration, even that which is for Aaron, and of that which is for his sons." This is the heave offering that Yeshua took up with him. So the resurrection day was the first day of the week for the saints of old who were in the grave. This is the day that they were resurrected, and this is the day that Yeshua took them up. And they were the heave offering that he presented to Jehovah.
What we're seeing then is there is this immediate fulfillment of the saints that were resurrected from their graves at the time. I'm assuming Yeshua was raised first.
Yes, he was.
Followed by the saints of old that are said to have been seen by many, many people walking to the holy city, which is Jerusalem.
Yes.
Is there another set of first fruits that we are looking at in the overall fulfillment of this day, this celebration?
Yes, there is another first fruits that Paul talks about. And he says, "Holy and blessed are they who are part of the first resurrection." And that resurrection is yet to be fulfilled because it hasn't come yet. The people who went up first were not people who were alive during Yeshua's time, but they looked forward to his coming. If you remember Simeon in the temple when Yeshua went to be dedicated, he prayed that he would not die until he saw the Messiah. And he said, "Now that my eyes have seen the Messiah, I can go ahead and die." Mm-hmm. These are the people with those kind of hearts and those that looking forward to the Messiah. Those are the people who are saints of old, who knew the understanding of what these Torah was all about. It was about the Messiah. David, King David, he knew. When you read the Psalms, he is describing what Messiah is going through. He is describing the crucifixion. He is describing his prayer. "Do not leave my soul in hell." These are the hearts and the men that understand that Jehovah was going to send a Messiah. And if they were alive, they would not have rejected him. These are the saints of old that we're talking about, who were resurrected.
So it behooves us to not just, well, if you're listening to this, it behooves you, it behooves all of us to go back and research this for ourselves. Every man, every woman, every child has to be convinced within themselves what the truth is. And Master left us with the Holy Spirit that will help us to understand and bring to our memory all truths. And this is an amazing, and I know it's a lot to take in if you're brand new. And we encourage you to reach out to us and ask questions. Search out the scriptures for yourself. Be that Berean that that was talked about in some of Paul's letters, where these people searched the scriptures daily. And what were those scriptures? Well, it was Torah, and it was the prophets, and it was the writings. They searched them. They didn't have a New Testament at that time. The New Testament didn't come in its fullness until well after the Apostle John had died, close to the beginning of the 2nd century. So we have to be like that. Study for yourself. You may not agree with what is being said, but let the Spirit talk to you. Let your Bibles talk to you. And we encourage you to reach out to us if you have any questions. Do you have anything remaining on this topic before we move to our next topic? You have talked about this in your program, It's Not As You Perceive. And
Yes.
Do you recall the episode?
It's episode 9.
Episode 9.
It's called the Wave Sheaf Offering.
We would encourage you to go to www.itsnotasYouPerceive.com and check that episode or installment out. And I believe she goes into a little bit more detail than we have here. And check that out at your first occasion, your first opportunity. Well, let's move on to our next topic, which has to do with a question that a dear listener of our podcast, of our ministry, sent in via email. And that has to do was, is it permissible to have our children play organized sports on the Sabbath? And would this playing of organized sports by our children be a violation of Torah and of Sabbath keeping? Now, I say that this situation and many, many others are not discussed or even addressed in Torah. But we must be careful, ever so careful not to add to or take away from Torah. Father was very explicit, and he didn't just say it in one area. He said it throughout his Torah in many, many different ways. We are to remain where it is written. We're not to go outside of what it's written. Now, the applications of this question of whether or not we can allow our children to play sports on the Sabbath goes way beyond simply that whole thing of what it is. Again, having our children play sports on the Sabbath. The application goes into so many other things. Can we go to the movies on the Sabbath? Can we go to parties? Can we go to weddings? Can we go for our daily run or our walks? A whole lot of things that we do here in Western society in the 21st century apply to this. And that's why I wanted to bring this to the forefront, because it was very easy for me to go ahead and respond to this dear listener's question, which I did. I responded directly to that listener, but I thought it was important to bring this to the general listenership, because this is something that affects us all. And especially if you're brand new to Torah, that you have to discern what you can and can't do on the Sabbath. And Torah's silence on this and the many other aspects and issues of Sabbath keeping require us, I believe, and this is Rod speaking, it requires us to examine a few things, and I have four. The first thing it requires us to do is to examine our relationship with the Almighty. Relationship is essential to this walk with Messiah. Why am I saying that? Well, our cousins in both sides of the fence of the faith are Christian, fundamental, charismatic, traditional Christians focus. What do they focus on? Well, they focus on getting to heaven. They focus on salvation. So where does relationship come in? Where does wanting to have that substantive, meaningful relationship with the creator of the universe, having that relationship, that deep abiding love and following of Yeshua, our Messiah, come in any of that? It's mentioned, but when you really drill down, I got to get to heaven. I want to be in heaven. I want to see my loved ones. I want to sing on the angelic choir. I want to walk the streets of gold. I remember coming up in the Baptist church of my youth, and most of our songs that we sang was all about getting past all the stuff that's going on in our lives, all of the hardships and things that we have to contend with every day. And then it has to do with getting up to the great by and by and walking the streets of gold and sitting down and talking to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and just gazing into the eyes of God or Jesus Christ, however it was that you remember it, for all eternity. It had nothing to do with, rarely to do with the relationship. Then we've got our cousins in Judaism. What is any idea, any thought about a relationship with the Almighty? No. It's all about national identity, being a nation, being at one with our brother Jews, our brothers in Judaism, doing the mechanical roteness of the rabbinic Talmud and the rabbinic version of Torah. That's what it's all about. The relationship that's had there is all about relationships with the system, more so than with the Almighty. Now, I'm not trying to beat down anybody in Christianity, and I'm not trying to beat down anybody in Judaism, but I'm just stating a simple fact. The second thing we must examine here is what it means to keep the Sabbath holy. And I would bet you $1 to a donut that your version of keeping Sabbath holy may very well differ from my understanding and version of what it takes to keep a Sabbath holy. We may have common understanding and common agreement of what would constitute in keeping a Sabbath holy, but more than not, we're going to have some variation. That's understandable. The third thing that we must examine is what it means to proclaim a holy convocation on the Sabbath. What does convening or proclaiming a holy convocation on the Sabbath have to do with our kids or children playing organized sports on the Sabbath? Well, it has to do with that is one of the three aspects of Torah, in the Torah, about keeping Sabbath. No work, convene a holy convocation, and to keep the day holy. Those are the three things that we were commanded to do or instructed to do in Torah. Now, if we're going to proclaim a holy convocation, we're going to keep the day holy and not do any work. It may be a little challenging to fit in to a Sabbath organized sports. I'm just saying. And the fourth thing that we should really consider examining, I believe, is what it means to do no work on the Sabbath, which I just mentioned. When we're talking about organized sports on the Sabbath, work could come into play when we're talking about the referees, the umpires, the coaches, the people who take care of the fields in which our children play, if they're getting paid, then we've got an issue with work. But let's just assume, for argument's sake, that we're just talking about everybody's volunteering here, so work is really not something that comes into play here. But the bottom line is that the Torah's silence on organized sports on the Sabbath requires us to really dig down and really examine why we're keeping Sabbath and what it means to keep the Sabbath holy and to proclaim a convocation and to do no work. Yes, there was no organized sports playing that I'm aware of when the Torah was given. And Hillary and I were discussing it just the other day. They didn't have mom and pop football leagues and baseball leagues back in the Sinai Desert at the foot of Mount Sinai, and probably even going into the land. It's possible, but I doubt it. So Torah would be naturally silent on it. But there are some common things that we really need to consider.
Yes, like you said, if the focus is salvation, then we have a problem. If we're loving him because salvation is our focus and we're focusing on self. And when Yeshua said, if you love me, keep my commandments.
Yes.
Right? And if you say you love God and does not keep his commandments, then you're a liar. Right? That's what Peter said. That's what John said. So if we say that we love, then we're going to do our best to keep the commandments. Now, how do you keep the commandments? Father has not given you blow by blow, bullet by bullet, this is this one, this is that one, this. No, he is leaving it up to our love to determine how we keep the commandment.
So that's why you feel, and I do very much agree, that's why a lot of the Torah and instructions are vague.
Yes, because he is leaving it subject to our love. You can love, and your love doesn't look like love to me, because when I love, there's more love being put into it. And everybody has a different level to which they can express their love. But there is a basic bottom level, the lowest level of expressing love. And that is the love that focuses on self. What do I get out of this? It's about, I am in the church because of salvation. It's all about salvation. Yeah, it's all about salvation in the end. But what about the relationship while you wait on this salvation? While you live out, how do you live your life in relationship to his laws, to his commandments? What kind of relationship are you having with the master? Mm-hmm. The second level of love, as we go up higher, a higher level of love, is your giving to get. If I give, this is what I'll get out of it. Mm-hmm. Therefore, I will give. Mm-hmm. Okay? That's just a little bit higher level of love. It's not much higher because you're still focusing on self. But the highest level of love is that love that says, I am giving without focusing on self. I am giving because I really do love this person.
Yes.
I really want to please this person. Mm-hmm. And whatever the needs of this person, I will give. Because I love.
Unconditional.
Regardless of whether or not the person can love me back. Regardless of whether or not the person can give back to me. And this is a kind of love husbands and wives must aspire to. Where this is a love where we can forgive and forget.
Right.
This is a love where we can overlook the person's mishaps. And this is a love where we say, I understand. I love you nonetheless. I still love you. And so Father is looking for us to grow in love. As we grow in love, we focus differently. Because we're no longer focusing on this is unleavened bread, but I can't wait to get my cookies.
Right.
Right? I used to have bagels for breakfast and I can't have any bagels
Right,
now.
right.
I gotta, I can't wait for this week to be done so I can go back to my bagels and cream cheese. It's just different, the level of love that you have. I never missed any kind of leaven throughout the whole period. And as you said that, it just dawned on me. We never missed anything. We never talked about it. We never missed it.
Right.
Pancakes, nope. Pizza, nope. Didn't even cross my mind. Cookies, you're the cookie monster. It never even crossed our mind.
You really didn't have to reveal that about me, but that's okay.
But I'm just saying how much you love cookies, and it didn't appeal. You didn't mention it once. It didn't matter because our heart was in the place where this is what he wants from us. I will give it.
Right.
And that is where he wants us to be. That's why he's not going to, outline for us,
right.
Step 1, step 2, step 3, yes, no, maybe so. No, he's going to say, at your own discretion, according to your love, describe to me your love by your actions. And that's really why he hasn't given to us the way people are. Well, I don't see that in Torah. I don't see that. I don't see that. Well, you don't see it because people didn't live the way we live today.
Indeed.
And so we have to bring in our lifestyle today in the measure of love. Back then, we didn't work the fields.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Back then, they worked the fields. Today, we don't work the fields. We go to work, drive a car and sit at a desk or stand in whatever we do, but we're not the agricultural society like they were. So now when we can get our love to that level where we're no longer focusing on what I want to do that I can't do and I would like to do and I'm being deprived of doing because of this day, I can't wait for this day to be over so I can get back to my life. Okay? When we can raise the level of our love, then it doesn't matter. Those things don't even appeal to us anymore. We just do it because of love. If you say you love God and don't keep his commandments, then you're a liar. And we don't want to be called liars by saying we love when all we're loving is at the very basic level where we're just looking out for myself. What do I get out of this?
Right. Right.
And so we have to get to the place where, as parents, we are training our children to love him too. Because children need to understand that there are some things that are very important to our Father in heaven. And if we love him, we have to train our children to love him too. So that when children are thinking about what they want to get involved in, they're going to say, well, is that going to impact the Sabbath?
Right.
And the child will make the decision before the parent even have to make a decision, because the child will say, I don't want to do that because it's going to impact the Sabbath. And I don't want to have to do that on the Sabbath.
Right.
So you never have to make a decision for your child and say, or disappoint your child to say, no, you can't do that because. But the child would have already made the decision. That's why we must train up a child in the way he should go, that when he's old, he will not depart from it. And that's our job. But when we come in to the Hebrew mindset, the Hebrew roots of the faith at this late stage in our lives, then our children have already been, guided on Saturday's a day we play baseball. Saturday's a day we play basketball. Saturday's a day we go to the movies, what have you. And then when that happens, then now the whole family has to reevaluate the lifestyle to bring it out of the world and bring it into Jehovah's mindset. Because when we get into his mindset, we're looking at what does he command. And even though, some things he says you could do, you think, but he says, blah, 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 blah. And I say, well, I'm just not going to do it because he would prefer for me to not go there. Right. It's a gray area, but I'm just not going to do it because I know what his preference is. So sometimes we want to live legalistically by the rule, but sometimes you got to live by the heart of love and say, based on the relationship that I want to have with him, let's bring this back into the natural with our husbands, right? He would prefer for me to be home with him on this day when he's off because he's been away in the military. He's been away wherever he has been. Okay. And now he's home. He would prefer if I could spend the day with him because he's got to go again. Mm-hmm. But I got my friends. I got to see my peeps, whatever is going on. It's my life. And when he's out there, but it's duty that calls him out there. It's duty that keeps him out there. Now that he's home, give up the friend for the day, for the week that he's home, and spend the time with him or with her. And give that extra to show your love. This is how we show our love. We don't live, people talk about being legalistic. We are being legalistic when we say, well, it doesn't say that, so I must be able to do it. We are the ones being legalist. Well, we're looking at the law rather than we're looking at the love and the relationship more than anything else. So as we grow in our relationship, we tend to grow in love. And as we grow in love, we tend to pull away from certain things, cut off certain things, just like as you mature, you're more selective about who your friends are. You're more selective about who you hang out with. And so this is the way it is when you are in love as opposed to just hanging out with somebody.
Well, I know that the vagueness of areas of Torah is troubling to many, many people, especially the newcomers, because you and I have received countless emails and comments and questions from people who've listened who are like, I'm just having a hard time trying to work through these Torah things. And, I just wish that there was a system out there that I can follow. And I wish that there was a manual that I can just go and know how to keep Sabbath from sundown to sundown. And it's disappointing to say, yeah, I know I'm that kind of person. I am a linear thinking, linear living person. And Hillary can tell you, when I get up in the day, usually I do this at night, I map out my day for the next day. So I know every hour of the day what I'm going to be working on in the next day. And when it comes, and I've been that way for a long time, when I was working, I knew what I wanted to do in a day, and any disturbances to that schedule just drove me up the wall. So I can identify with individuals, and I also experienced this, and maybe Hillary can even comment on that when I first came into the faith and we had all of these kind of vague areas, and we'd get into these massive discussions about, well, can we or can we not? It drove me crazy a lot of the times, and a lot of times we would choose to disagree. A lot of times one would have to give in and say, okay, well, I'll just go with what you say. But there wasn't a buy-in, and ultimately it wasn't until later on that it became evident to me that it's not about me, it's about my relationship with Father. It's about my love for Father. And if I can get to that point in which I can focus on what is going to make Father happy, how can I please Father, then these vague questions, these vague areas of Torah will be easily answered. It won't take any time to figure it out at all. It's very easy to sort out, because the other end of the spectrum is Judaism, rabbinic Judaism, which I believe it was that the rabbis created rules and traditions around Sabbath keeping that included 39 general categories in order to keep the Sabbath. And within those 39 general categories, hundreds and hundreds of individual specific rules for Sabbath keeping that ranged from how to light the candles to washing of hands to the prayers that would be recited. What can be eaten first and it's just insane. And that's what the enemy does. It completely pushed aside the whole point of the relationship and brought in a mechanized system. And before you know it, Father's pushed out of the equation entirely. It's now, like Hillary said, it's all about me. It's all about, well, you got to, you, in order to appear holy, in order to be a part of this community, you need to do this.
And the other thing, too, is that when Father says that we must obey, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. If we are going to obey, it's a reason why he wants us to obey. Because when we obey, we get closer to him, and he will teach us more about that subject.
True.
The closer we get, the more we learn about the subject, the more we love him. The more we understand him, the more we are happy to obey. The more we want to obey. The more we seek to clear our calendars so that we can obey. We do whatever it takes so that we can obey. We will make that sacrifice in order to obey, because obedience produces love.
True.
And the more we obey and the more we grow in love is the tighter our relationship becomes.
Indeed.
And it's all about a relationship. And so if we can just get to that place where we stop thinking, well, what does the black and white say?
Right.
And look at your heart and say, what does my heart say?
Right.
What does his heart say? And when we can see that and look in that direction, then we're not looking at the path of legalism.
Right.
Then we're looking at the part of, this is what I really want to do. This is what he wants from me. There's a song that I used to sing. It says, and every day he wants more and more of me. And today he came again and said, I must give more to him. For every day he wants more and more of me. And if this is going to be our relationship with our Master Yeshua, who is the author and finisher of our faith, he's given us everything he's got. Can we just give him a little bit more love?
Mm-hmm.
We do it for our spouses.
We do it for our bosses.
And we do it for our bosses, yes. But why can't we do it for him when he has eternal life to give to us?
Right.
He has blessings to give to us, and we don't even have to ask him for it. When we give him love, he just showers us with it. Stuff we didn't even ask for shows up. We're just so blessed. Things we didn't even know we were getting came to us.
Yes.
And this is how he gives us his love, both physically, mentally, spiritually, and every other alley he gives to us. So let's start seeking to grow in love because that's when we stop asking questions. Should we? Can we? Is it okay? Just do a heart check and go with your heart. If you go with your heart, then you're going where the love is. And this is how I would tell anybody who is asking questions about how to observe the Sabbath, how to keep the Sabbath holy. Do a heart check. Where am I? Where do I stand with my Father in heaven? How do I want to please him? If I found out that what I'm doing right now would not please him, would I keep it going or would I stop it because I want somebody to tell me before I stop? Or wait until I can find it in the word before I will stop? I'll just stop just because. I don't know if it's okay or not, but I don't feel too good about it. So I'm just going to stop because I don't think it pleases him, or maybe it doesn't please him. So I'm just not going to do it. And if it means I have to stay and make an extra sacrifice because I made this decision to please him, that's okay. It's my love relationship that I'm focusing on.
It's just ingrained in us as people, as humans, to always want to rationalize why we do what we do. And we always end up having to turn to other people, men. And I'm using men in general, it can be men or women, to tell us how we're supposed to walk these things out, how we're supposed to live our lives, how we're supposed to worship Father. And I'm reminded of that story of Yeshua when he is sitting at the Jacob's well in Samaria, and the woman comes to draw water and engages Yeshua, the master, in a conversation. And they're talking about a number of things. And it gets to the point where the woman at the well recognizes that Yeshua, this man is unique. He knows stuff. And she's kind of surmising that he could be a learned person, maybe a rabbi. He certainly seems he could be a prophet. So I'm going to ask him. I'm going to ask him about this temple worshiping thing, because we've always been taught here in Samaria that we're supposed to worship Father on Mount Gerizim. So I'm going to take this opportunity to ask him, because I think he'll probably have a good perspective on this. And this is found in the 4th chapter of John, beginning at verse 22. And it's recorded where it says, Yeshua saying to the woman, after posing the question, he's like, you Samaritans worship what you do not know. But we worship what we do know, because salvation is from the Jews. Now, let me stop here. Yeshua was not saying that salvation comes from Judaism. A lot of people have said, oh, well, this proves that we need to follow Judaism, religion of Judaism, because salvation comes from Judaism. But that's not what Master was talking about when he said salvation comes from the Jews. He is saying it comes from the lineage of Judah and the oracles that were entrusted to the tribe, the people of Judah, from which our Master derived. So continuing on, he says, because salvation is from the Jews, but an hour is coming and is now here when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. This embodies the whole point here. True worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. It's not talking about rote mechanical execution of instructions in Torah, which ends up often being the Talmud for many people who end up having to go into the Talmud to find out how to keep the feast and the Sabbaths and so on and so on. Master says, Yah is a spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. So when we're talking about spirit and truth, this is two-pronged formula for worship of Father, for that relationship which Hillary has been talking about. True worship, truth. The word is true. Psalm 119, verse 160. The psalmist wrote, "Thy word is true from the beginning, and every one of thy righteous judgments endureth forever." And then the other point is spirit. John chapter 17, verse 3. "And this is eternal life, that they being master's disciples," which ultimately includes us, "that they know you." That's that relationship that Hillary was talking about, that they know you, the only true God, and Yeshua Messiah, whom you have sent. And what is he talking about to know? Well, to know is the Greek term gnosko, which means to learn to know a person through direct personal experience, which implies a continuity of relationship. And you can check that out in the Louw-Nida lexicon, which talked about that whole thing. I like to always give references if I have them. And this knowing that Master was referring to is more than a simple cognitive awareness that God exists. It's that deep, abiding relationship that Hillary was talking about.
And if you think about this also, one last point I'd like to make is that he says, "You shall keep the Sabbath holy, for it is holy unto you. Everyone that defiles it shall be put to death." So disobedience leads to death. And it is a sign between Jehovah and the children of Israel forever. And this is in Exodus 31, 12 to 18. So when we understand the sign, this Sabbath is a sign between us and Father, then we understand it's like taking off your wedding ring when you go out. That's a sign between man and wife, sure. Right? So you keep your wedding ring on so that everybody knows you're taken. In the same way, this Sabbath is a sign between us and Father. Yes. We are his bride. Mm-hmm. So remember, this relationship, this sign speaks of the relationship that we have. Mm-hmm. And this is why we do it this way, because of our love relationship.
The Sabbath should never be a burden. It should be a joy. And I know, and I've said this many, many times, that, the Sabbath should be the one day out of 7. And this kind of gets into, and we're bringing this installment to an end here, to a close. So, but this whole thing with the Sabbath, that it needs to be a joy, that it should be a joy, and that it should be different than any of the other 6 days of the week. To me, anything that we do that we could normally do on those other 6 days, the Sabbath should be so special that it should be unique in every aspect possible and different from any other days of the week. And that's, from my perspective, that's why, Hillary and I, you and I, we endeavor to get our shopping out of the way on Friday, which a lot of people call preparation day, to get our shopping out of the way, to get our clothes washing out of the way, to do our cleaning out of the way, and even food preparation out of the way. And this is not being legalistic. It's just that these are things that we do every day of the week. So we want to make the day clear. It's like you said, the analogy of the date. Mm-hmm. People who go on dates, that usually dates are unique. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're doing something, whether it's going out to a nice dinner, whether it's going out to see a show, whether it's going on a lavish vacation. These are things that we don't do every day. Mm-hmm. It's a set apart day. And it's a joy. Usually it's a joy. Usually in healthy relationships, when people go on dates, it's an exciting time. It's something you look forward to. It's something that you go all out for, because when your partner enjoys it, you enjoy it. And the same thing applies with us. When we go all out of our way, Father takes great pleasure when we go to the fullest extent to make that day holy. Because why? What Hillary said, we love our Father, so we do everything possible we can to make that day special. Then we, in response, in back, it makes us happy and enjoyable. I can say that I've always said this to myself. I said, when Hillary is happy, I'm happy. Whatever I can do to make her content and happy, by default, I'm happy. And the same thing is reversed, because she knows. So she goes out of her way to do things and cook meals that she knows I like, and to take care of certain elements and things that I don't normally do. She goes out of her way to do it because she knows that when I'm happy, she is happy. And the same thing transcends with our relationship with Father. That when we go out of our way to make Father happy and please him, then by default, we are pleased.
That's right. Paul says, present your body a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service.
Service, yes.
Right? It's reasonable. He's not asking you to do anything that is over the top. He's asking you to do your reasonable service. So let's grow in our obedience, because when we do, we grow in our love, and obedience produces love, because the relationship gets tighter. You get to know the person better. Sometimes we can finish each other's words because we know what the other person is thinking, even though the person never said it. I know what you're going to say.
Right.
Just because we've had that relationship where we're understanding of each other, so that we can do that. And we want to have that kind of relationship with Father where we know what he would like, what pleases him. That's the goal. And we're all not there, but we're starting somewhere.
Right.
But then the goal is to get there. But the more we do it, the more you practice, the more you become proficient.
Well, we are at the end of this installment, and we've discussed today a lot of things. We've discussed, but two general things. We discussed the first fruits, and we discussed the actual Torah instruction. On top of, we also discussed the prophetic and spiritual implications associated with there. Hillary gave us a very good and a very, well, even though it was broad, there was a lot of meat to it. So we got a lot out of that. And then we talked about keeping the Sabbath holy, in particular when it relates to participating in things, participating in events that may not be part and parcel of keeping a Sabbath, such as organized sports. So it is our hope, trust, and prayer that you were able to get something out of this. And again, we invite you to join us on social media, contact us at the various platforms that we've brought up to you in the housekeeping portion of this installment. And that we also want you to have a blessed week. We're coming out of this spring feast, and we've started now the 50-day count to Shavuot, which is our next feast day, which is a high holy day for newbies. So we got that in 50 days, and that usually falls around the June time frame every year, give or take some weeks. So we've got that. That's usually falls into the summer. Again, bear in mind that these feasts always occur during a harvest season. Yes. So we've got the spring harvest. We're going to have this. Then when Shavuot comes, we've got the summer. And then tabernacles and atonement and trumpets are the fall. So we've just about finished the spring, but we're not done yet because we're supposed to guard the month of the Aviv. We still got we've got another week or two of Aviv left. So we need to stay in that frame of mind of purging out the leaven, acknowledging what Yeshua did for us, and looking into the future as first fruits and what he did when he resurrected and ascended to his Father. So do you have any closing thoughts?
We are open to receive your questions and to respond.
Well, with that, we bid you Shavua Tov and have a wonderful, blessed week in Yeshua Messiah. Walk in the power and might of his Holy Spirit and exercise your love for Father. Live and dwell within his love and in his will. And until next time, take care.
Shabbat Shalom.